trying to find his way. And there was, unfortunately, a horrific murder on Glen Mills campus. A lady by the name of Miss Robar, Vida Robar. She was found in her cottage. She was stabbed with an ice pick approximately 47 times. She was found by her then husband, Fred Robar, who also worked there as well. This was a national story back in 1930. The news went across the country. There was immediate investigation by the Delaware County detectives and prosecutors, headed by William McCarter Jr. and Oliver Smith, who was the lead detective. Within less than a day, somehow this investigation turned to Alexander. This 16-year-old boy was brought in for interrogation. He was interrogated multiple times with no lawyer and with no parents. He was a minor. And within 2 days, by October 7th, he began to confess. He confessed twice on the 7th, once on the 9th. And at that point, they believed that they had their killer. Despite the fact there was no forensic or no physical evidence whatsoever. There was nothing to connect Alexander to this murder, other than the fact that he was a convenient black boy at the hands of these detectives and this prosecutor. And I have with me the infamous photo of William McCarter, the DA at the time, on October 9th, who believes he has caught his killer. And if you look closely, and everybody, this is attached to the complaint, you see Alexander with a black eye, you see this ice pick, and that is the start of this horrible, horrible tragedy, this nightmare. It wasn't until 2 weeks later, he was finally appointed a warder, a gentleman by the name of William Ridley. William Ridley was the only black attorney in Delaware County at the time. He was practicing for a couple decades at that time. Happens to be Sam Lemon's great-grandfather, and we're going to talk about why Sam Lemon went on the quest that he did. But he took on the case. He applied for fees. He applied for costs to try the case, and he was given $10 to try the case. A trial date happened within a month, January 6th. All-white jury. Whatever evidence was turned over to the defense attorney was turned over, and within a day, he was convicted of first-degree murder. In fact, if I recall, the charge to the jury from this judge was all evidence points that the defendant did it. There was a sentencing date, he was sentenced to death, and horrifically on June 6th, he was given the electric chair to become the youngest person in Pennsylvania to be executed at 16 years old. This tragedy haunted the family, haunted the parents, haunted Susie, haunted William Ridley and his family. I just want to say that we want to also recognize Osceola Williams and John Thomas Williams. They were the mother and father of Alexander. They died in the 60s. They lived in heartache with this tragedy. I believe there was a miscarriage. She lost a child as well. And Susie can tell you the grief that the family went through. I also want to recognize he had 12 brothers and sisters. He had Alice Lavina Graves, George Williams, James Murray Williams, Beatrice Williams, John Henry Williams, Leroy Williams, Osceola Williams, Guy Williams, Robert Williams, Francis Williams, and Albert Williams, who predeceased him as a baby. You are not forgotten. We are here today to fight for Alexander Clay Williams. So, this lawsuit is filed. It's a wrongful conviction lawsuit. It's filed in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. And how we got here was really Dr. Sam Lemon. Dr. Sam Lemon, who was determined to seek the truth. He lived with this nightmare, he lived with this grief, he lived with this anguish, and he was hell-bent on researching and finding out exactly what happened. And after decades of research, he unearthed the truth. The truth is that Alexander McClay Williams is innocent. There was evidence that was determined that the prosecutors withheld during the trial that were key to this case. Some of the interesting things that we found, just to understand the egregious behavior of this case. The death certificate of the victim, who died, I believe, on the 3rd, was signed on the 4th. Well, he didn't confess until the 7th, but somehow his name was put on the birth certificate. So that was determined to be forged. Also, Alexander McClay Williams' death certificate. If you look closely, it's scribbled on there to make it an 18 so he would be an adult. And they could say that he was an adult and not a minor. That was determined. It was determined that made a finding early on that this was done by a strong man. Alexander was 5'5", 125 pounds. He was very small. It was later determined that the Robars filed for divorce, and the husband, on the basis the husband committed extreme cruelty. That evidence was never given over. There was countless pieces of evidence that proved that all evidence pointed to her husband. But yet, they decided to pick out Alexander McClay Williams. Over time, Dr. Lemon worked with the Delaware County District Attorney's Office, specifically Jack Stolzheimer. And we are grateful to Jack Stolzheimer's work because he embraced this case, his office embraced this case, and he worked with Dr. Lemon to find the truth. And on, I believe, June 13th of 2022, in front of Judge Kelly, Alexander McClay Williams' conviction was vacated. The prosecutor's office, specifically through Jack Stolzheimer, took the position to null pros. And if you look attached to the complaint, he specifically says that this case should have never been brought and that it was a horrific tragedy to justice. To further amplify and vindicate Alexander McClay Williams, the state of Pennsylvania, through then Governor Wolf, signed a proclamation acknowledging the wrongful conviction of Alexander McClay Williams. He specifically talks about it, and he says specifically, and this is Governor Wolf's proclamation signed, it's attached to the complaint, Mr. Williams was legally abandoned by the court system and left to die at the hands of the state. He outlines all of the wrongful conviction issues in the case, and he talks about it succinctly, and he verifies it and stands behind it. Ladies and gentlemen, today represents a historical day, not only for all of us, for the family, for Susie, who sits here proudly. I sat with Susie a number of times. I promised her that we would see that justice is amplified and extended, that it will not be forgotten, that we will do everything necessary to hold all those accountable. And we're doing that with the filing of this wrongful conviction lawsuit, holding Delaware County and all of the different detectives and prosecutors that were involved. Just to get a flavor, when this case was tried, this is a 16-year-old boy. Remember, the defense lawyer got $10 to try the case. The top, and it's attached, is the team, the prosecutors, the detectives, everyone involved in this case to prosecute this poor 16-year-old boy, who ultimately got the death penalty and was executed. I want to close by saying that justice in this case was not only disrespected, it was blatantly disregarded. This case exemplifies prosecutorial and police misconduct at the highest degree. Alexander McClay Williams was nothing more than a scapegoat at the behest of racist detectives and prosecutors. This lawsuit intends to hold those accountable, and it will further amplify that Alexander McClay Williams is not only innocent, but his case represents a movement of change in our justice system for those who may become victims of the same horrible fate. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to ask Dr. Lemon to come up, say a few words.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you all for being here today. This is really a momentous occasion, and this is something that has touched me deeply. The Williams family recently told me that they have adopted me, so I'm going to have to hyphenate my last name.